Right, so this of course is the Maimer that is said always, from the Haftarah is said always at every Chodesh. I'm looking at the wrong one. So the shilas of the Maimer are that v'nifkadeta and yipoked mean opposite things. Nifkadeta is presence, being present, remembering. It brings the psukim that indicate that. And yipoked is absence. Also brings a pasuk, scriptural support. So l'chayda, they're opposite. And the fact that the pasuk puts them together, the inference is that it's one inyan. Especially since the pasuk says ki, because you will be remembered because yipoked. And then was the question of the language. There's many ways to say absence. Why use a word that also means present? So this further underscores that it's all one inyan. Hab v'hatalya, one is dependent on the other. The absence, the bittul, as it emerges, is the very means for the gilui. So what is the whole beer? So the whole beer really is about zman. Because this is what Erev Rosh Chodesh is all about, the renewal of the month. So what's the meaning of that? It's the Seder is that first the moon disappears, it gets smaller and smaller, and then there's the Amshocha, the Moiled. In contrast to the Shemesh, which has its perpetual cycle, ever present. So Yidna also compared to the Levana, he brings the Gemara there that they wish to appease the Levana by saying that tzaddikim will be named after you or like you, David HaKoten, as in the Moir HaKoten. So Yidden also is the same process that through Helam and Bittul, Nafshe Kavak Eltia, Bittul Hayesh, and even Bittul to the extent of Bittul B'Metzius. So then Dafke Morim v'Kodesh Eshkoin. The pasuk itself says, "As Daka v'Shval Ruach." Where does the exalted, the Holy One dwell? The crushed and the humble of spirit. So that's the general inyan that the Mochor Chodesh, the Gilui, the v'nifkadeta is Dafke ki yipoked, is Dafke because of the bittul of Erev Rosh Chodesh. So to understand all of this is the inyan of Zman, which is all rooted in Rotzev V'Shuv, which the nekud of it all is that the departure of the old, that's the Helam, which is that's the Achona, and that's the only way that there can be the Amshach of the Chodesh of the new, of the higher level. Rotzev V'Shuv, that's the nature of time. The moment, you can't have two moments simultaneously. The whole Geder of Zman is that the moment is gone and a new moment emerges. So, B'chlal Zman, it goes on to say, is defined by both Shemesh and Yoreach. The Shemesh, its constant cycle, constant rotation, and the moon in its cycle of birth and rebirth. So then you have this whole Hakdama here, that Yisavus is divided into three. I'm looking at Eis Beis there, yeah? Yisavus is divided into three categories: Olam, Shon, and Nefesh. So in all of it, there's the inyan of Zman. In other words, all of them is the Seder of Heleb and Gilui. So Heleb and Gilui in Olam is the moon. Then there's Heleb and Gilui in Zman. That's the Rotze and Shuv of Zman. And then there's the Heleb and Gilui in Nefesh, that the Nefesh is always in a state of movement. It's Aliyah. Hopefully it's always ascending, but there's also brings the Gemara Yidden are either ascending very high or descending. So that's also the change, the constant flux, the change, the present being replaced, disappearing, and then a new moment, a new dargah. Life is not static. Either it's growing or it's decaying, but nothing is the same the next millisecond. The famous Bechaya, the Chassidus quotes that a tinnik Mishanoiled maschil is yabish, very sobering. A child, as soon as it's born, begins to wither. The physical body is aging with every moment. No relationship is the same. Nothing in life is the same the second, either right now or closer or further. Be'etzim, yes, but not in Giluyim. At any rate. So, then he starts to say, the Inyan of Zman B'chlal is Mechudesh. Mechudesh means something novel. It's not integral to Likus. And where does it start? In the big picture, in the harder picture, it starts with Malchus. Molach, Melech, Yimlech, past, present, and future. But higher than Malchus, relative to the kind of hardcore Zman that Malchus, because of the tremendous Helim in Malchus, relative to Malchus, higher than that, there's no Zman. Obviously, in Atzmos, there's no Zman. And he brings the famous quotation from the Alter Rebbe, that not this, to define godliness as a creator, that's Malchus and lower. Likus is bligvol, higher than creator. And higher than Zman and Mokim. And at the end of the mind, it's that that's being nimsha. That's the Machaya Chayim. That's the Tainuk that has to be drawn into creation. But before we get to that, even though we just said that true, again, hardcore defined Zman begins at Malchus, but there's the Seder Zmanim even higher. We don't mean it in the same limitation as Malchus, which is a very profound Helim. Dibur completely conceals what's invested in it, has to be decoded. But nonetheless, there's a Seder Zmanim, and he brought you bring it here. The pasuk Vayiherev Vayivoker doesn't say, and Hashem said, "Let there be Erev and Boker," but it was Erev and Boker. So it's a medrash. The medrash says Malam, but there's a Seder Zmanim even before creation. So the word is, it's not Zman Mamish, but Seder Zmanim. What Seder Zmanim? Kedim of Ichor, higher and lower. That's what we mean. So there too, the same principles of Zman operate, of Ratzah and Shuv, as it were, of Helim and Gilui. Meaning to say that the lower level can't emerge until the higher level has departed. It's no longer in a state of Gilui. And he brings Mishalim from the Nefesh. That's Ois Gimel. We're all following this, yeah? What's the Mishalim of the Nefesh? So Chachma and Bina. So there's a whole arichas here, but then the general Nekuda is, Bina cannot emerge as long as the Nekuda Chachma illuminates the mind. So even though it comes from there, and dependent on it, like the river only comes from the Mayan, from the spring. However, as long as we're in the world of the spring, there's no river. Remaining in the world of Chachma, Bina, which is the subjective analysis, cannot begin. And he went through the arichas there, all the dargas of Chachma, even the lowest final manifestation of Chachma, still has to be Nisalim. Because as long as we're remaining in the world of Chachma, there's still the possibility of another solution. It's not hard and fast. And Bina can't work if there isn't a maskana. And Chachma by its nature doesn't have a maskana mamish. He went into the arichas, even the midrash sheba Chachma, like the Shammai and Hillel orientation, it's still not at that level a final reality. In the level of Chachma, they can still well up other possibilities. That's why the Tanoim debate, etc. It's not. I said it at the end of the discussion. It's open for discussion. So Riyah can't begin. The Shmiya component, in other words, cannot begin before the Riyah component experience is completely over. Read the book while watching the movie. Can't do that. You can see it and now read it. They're two very separate experiences, and they're mutually exclusive. You can't be objective and subjective at the same time. Chachma is defined by objectivity and Bina by subjectivity. So that's the inyan of Seder Zmanim. Meaning to say that the higher level has to be in this aleph, and then the next level can emerge. So that's the way it is where in Chachma Binah. Then going down towards the end of the ice, 2/3 down, likewise in Mochor, that even though the same thing, the even though is you can't have midas without Mochor. The emotions are born from an appreciation, from an understanding of the value of something. Either it's something you want to be close to or acquire, or be fearful and be distant of, ave and yira. But it all has to come from where? From the intellectual appreciation. But if we're remaining in intellectual appreciation, the emotions can't emerge. True, you can have atzmisdik emotions without seichel. We don't speak of that. That's not the example here. Because the Emes says that midas have their Chodesh, and that's in nefesh, independent of Mochor and deeper than Mochor. We're talking about the midas that are born from Mochor, that kind of these bonanas, the Shema Yisrael, and the Haftas Hashem Alekecha, these bonanas, in other words, the emotions that to things we could never arrive at without appreciating them. They're not instinctual. There are the midas that are instinctual. We don't speak of instinctual midas, but midas that are born as a result of maturation, understanding, values. So the whole process of appreciation has to give way, and just left with the bechein, this is good, and allow the midas, the heart, to respond. So there's got to be tzimtzum there as well. So likewise, he says, in the whole ishtalshalos, there has to be this process of tzimtzum, kadima ve'ichor, helem and giloi, for the chain of levels to occur. Yitzchak ben Avram Yitzchak, it's a birthing process. And he brings the Maimar Chazal that Hamayim Horu v'yoldu afela, the water, when it was gathered in, gave birth, Horu, literally bore, and then gave birth to the darkness meaning the dry land, the earth, which is dark physically. It's the first time explained that. So here too, the water has to recede, and then the earth can emerge, which is Gvura from Chesed. And likewise, all the way down, Ishtal Shalos, all the way down to Malchus. So that's the Seder Azmanim. Then he said, Neis Daled. Yeah, we good? We're just following as I'm doing it? Yeah, you with me? So even though he just said, now the Seder Azmanim is all 10 Svidas, we just talked about Chachma Binah, but there's a difference. The world of Mochor still belongs to really high in creation, Hanistoris, which means precede creation. V'haniglois are the midas. The midas are the Chodesh of Olamas, much more intimately than Mochor, which is a much more removed role. Even though there's a Seder Azmanim there, but it's very far removed from the world of midas. Chesed, Sunday, each day of the week comes into being as a result of the 6 midas. And therefore the main Yischalkos is in the 6 midas. I told you about the circle. Therefore the center of the circle, just I'll tell you now, the center of the circle is Shabbat. Actually, it fits in very much. The end of the Maim. End of the Maim, but is all ad, what's the whole Kut of the end of the Maim is ad David Higdil. At the end of the day, Malchus, which on the one hand is the source of the real hardcore Zman, the Chodesh is deeper and it's ma'oder it, and Davka Malchus is Mushish in Taindog, Primus at Taindog, Shabbos, the 7th day, Malchus, etc. But the whole process starts with the Zohar. Zohar is ma'oder the bittul of Malchus, and Zohar is mamshich in Malchus. It all starts of Malchus on the receiving end. But at the end, Malchus then is a mashpia. That's Shabbos, which is the whole beer. The Shabbos is in Zman, but really higher than Zman. And then finally, Yom Shekuli Shabbos, that's Ad David Higdil. That's the overview. So I was telling you that the Rishima of the Rebbe, so explains the circle and its properties. So the center of the circle is Shabbos. What's a circle? A circle is a series of points equidistant from one point. That's a circle. It's all defined by everything equal from the center. So the center is Shabbos. I'm not mistaken, he makes the point there. Yeah, when speaking about the diameter, which is pi, and the radius, which is obviously double pi, circumference, and I'm talking the diameter. The diameter is a line that goes from one end of the circle through the center. That's the diameter. Pi is the relationship of the diameter to the circumference. If that would be a rope, how many times would it plot around the circumference? And 3 this endless string of numbers. So the radius, which is half, is double, is 6 this endless string of numbers. So he's saying that the circle is the cycle of Zman. The center of the circle is Shabbos. So first we have to appreciate it's a point. Now even in mathematics we know that a point is almost a theoretical inyan. Because the moment you represent it becomes a line. If you take your pencil and you mark the point, there's some dimensions to that. It's already eaten into the line. So it's there but it's not there. Not only is it there, it defines the whole circle. But the moment you want to give it a definition, you've corrupted it. When you make a point with your pencil, in that pencil point is the Nakudah. But you can't identify it. So that's Shabbos, which is bemis rooted in Tainok Haiden Ishtalshalus, as we're learning in the Maimer, suffuses Ishtalshalus, 3 days before, 3 days later. And that covers the whole week, the last 3 days and the next 3 days. So he's pointed that Shabbos lends, so from Shabbos, which is the center, to the circumference is the radius. Take that radius, that's the weekday. It's 6, 6, 6, 6, and an infinite number. That infinite number, that's the Mshochav, Tainug of the Bligvul in time. It's literally an infinite number. I don't grasp it myself exactly what it means, but it just can't be honed as this is where it ends. So it's infinite, in relatively speaking, and it's Shabbos that lends that. The radius plotted around the diameter is 6 midas, and the infinite property of Shabbos. So that's one of the Rishimis that it takes. In this case, it's geometry, right? And explains its properties as expressive, of course, of Elikus. Then I mentioned to you another very elaborate Rishima, right, that subsequently was published in the scientific journal by Professor Branover, the chief editor, that explains the different properties of solids and liquids and the pressure they exert on the flat surface. And it is mind-blowing stuff. We should do it. Maybe it'll be a Sunday shir also. We'll do these interesting things on a Sunday morning. Well, you will do it not from the Rishim. The Rishim is Bekitz and Nimritz. It took a couple of scientists to unravel it. So he wrote it out as a scientific paper. But it's not that complex. We can follow it, even without. Okay. It's Moededik. Bringing out the one hand the equality of every act. Every act is Amshach of Atzmos, every mitzvah. At the same time, each one of us does that mitzvah with different kavanah and brings a whole different persona, perspective, level of nefesh to bear on the action. That too is a different impression, a different impact on the world, dependent on one's spiritual height and expansiveness. Liquids, height, width, exerting different pressure. Okay, so Mitzvah Shem will do that as I'm recalling it. Okay, now back to Muba Proteus. So the Midas are the ones more intimately engaged and responsible for Zman. Now that happens in Klal and Prat. So the 6 Midas of Atzilus, for example, so from there is drawn the millenniums. Chesed is the first 1,000 years, and Bapila was that way for the first 1,000 years. Everybody lived long, extraordinary long lives, and the words of Chazal, Nizoyin Nechazdish Ala Kodesh Baruch Hu. The second 1,000 years was already Gvura. the mabul, and then the punishments, and the migdal bovel, Ir bovel. And then came the third 2,000 years Tiferes, Matan Torah, starting with Avram, and so on. The Mefarshim explained the 1,000 years correspond to the 6 days of the week. The Gemara doesn't say Chesed Gevurah. Chassidus Kabbalah does, and the Mefarshim explain how the 1,000 years correspond to the various midas. Now it's the end of Yesod, which is all about connection. That's the big word today, is connecting. And Yesod is also the male and female bond. So that's all the whole dynamic and discussion in this era. I just summarized the Ramban. The Ramban explains the connection to the 6 midas. So that's Bechlal. So that's the way it is. What in Atzilus, and then it's Nimshech in Rosh Hashanah for the year, and then for the whole year, that particular year, and then the Yud Beishvatim Rosh Chodesh for each particular month. So the Seder Hazmanim now, it's more than Seder Hazmanim now. Now it's Nimshech in Zman, Klal is dik Zman, more Prati is dik, and more Prati is dik still. Yeah, we're getting the picture. Then came the Big Shaili and Nois Hey, which is the whole key to the Maimer, in answering the, but we already answered really why the bittul is required for the Giloi. That's answered already. But now he's going to explain where this is all going, and that's Ad David Higdil. So it's all prefaced by the question, L'chei Shabbos. Shabbos is what? Why is only Shabbos Kerel 6 days? Shabbos is higher than Rosh Chodesh and higher than Rosh Hashanah. No malacha. And then he added, there could be a mistake there. 1 minute. Second, we'll have a look together. Page 200. No, that's correct. Yeah, the weekday is what Malchus gets from Chochmah, which is the source of all Gili through Zah. But Rosh Chodesh, it gets it not through Zah. But that's why it's quasi not considered a regularly a Mei HaMaisa. Women don't do work, etc. But still, Malchus remains where it is. There's no Aliyah in Malchus. So Shabbos is a connection to Meichen Dabba Atzma, which means Tainuk in the general term, in the general sense. That's why we don't speak words which is Malchus. We don't speak words of weekday words on Shabbos, because we're elevated to the world of Machshava, which is again general, higher than Ishtalshalas Tainuk. So it's higher than Rosh Chodesh and higher than Rosh Hashanah, which is why we don't blow shofar Shabbos Shecholi Rosh Hashanah Shecholi b'Shabbos. So comes the question, and yet it has the you'd think the higher you go, the more the Seder Azmanim is Nimshach, and here the less for 6 days. What's in the code of the answer? The answer is because it's higher than the whole process period. But even though it's higher, it has its ashpah on the weekday. So it's connected to the 3 days before, the 3 days after. That's the Nekudah. And the words of the Maimer, there's 2 levels of Chayas. There's Chayim and Mechaya Chayim. Chayim stam is Ishtaushalas. Mechaya Chayim is the whole Chodesh of it all. The Eibish's Tainuk, which in the end is what? His desire for a Dira B'Tachtoin in relationship with us. That's what justifies the whole Chayim, the whole process of Ishtaushalas. And he explained also the Tur, interestingly, explaining the Bracha Ber Nefoshes. So first we praise Hashem for filling the Chesroinon. And then we add, L'hachis Bem Nefesh Kol Choy. So he explains this, there's 2 separate inyonim. There is the Eibishter providing the lack, that's Ishtalshalos. And the l'achis b'am nefesh kol choy, that's mechaya chayim, that's Hashem, it means the begashim is there, providing beyond our needs. That's what it means there, beyond our needs. Not just our needs, but beyond our needs. But b'pnimis it means ishtalshalos and hayden ishtalshalos. They bish this tainuk. So that's what Shabbos is. Therefore, it's higher than ishtalshalos, and therefore time stops then and is reset. He explains to the next ice. Why don't we? There's no change in the week. Why are we starting all over again? The month changes, the year changes. There's a new cycle of the sun. There's no overt change when it comes to the week. You know, if you tell someone Sunday, something happened on Sunday, they have no idea. Season, year, there's no context. If you give them a day of the month, you have a context. A physical context. A year also have a physical context. There's no context by just saying it's a Sunday or a Monday. And yet, why? Because Betzim it's higher than Zman and therefore it's reset. So Shabbos is the Tainug, and he says that the Tainug is, the Hishtaushulus is complete, now the home is there, and now I'm going to live there with my soulmate. That's the Eibish's Tainug revealed on Shabbos. That's the Neshama Yisera. Chai Yichida. So therein lies between Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah. The Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Hashanah overtly, it's all about Yitzchak Elimus. Of course, it has elements. Rosh Hashanah is the Avodah of the Yid and everything else, but that basically the general overt definition of Rosh Hashanah is creation. The Hamshacha for creation. So it's all the Tzedek HaOlamus, Zman. And it starts in a cloud and it goes into the Pratim. But Shabbos is the Neshama Yisera, it's Chai Yichida, it's Mechaya Chayim, higher. But it's a Nimshach in Nefesh Ruach Neshama. And that's why it's Shaykh to the 3 days before and afterwards, and the 3 days afterwards. And we're suggesting Nefesh Ruach Neshama also the 6 days of the 6 Midas. Right, then it's why it's Yom Rishon, which we just said. The Malim Hazman. He explained the yin of man, that even though man, the whole Hamshacha really is a Shabbos Dikir Inyan, because man is Tainug. In the words of the Zoya, Tola de Bedulcha, it's the dew of precious gems, of crystal, of gems. It came down with his dew, the man. What does that go on? A precious gem is a beautiful thing. That's the Tanakh Shlamar Mishtal Shalos. And that's what the Shabbos is. But then it affects the week, it provides for the week. Into this man. Therefore it actually physically fell during the week. But Shabbos itself, which is higher nishtal, is not shaykh, there should be the rid of the man lamata. But still it all comes from there. The whole origin is the Eibish's Tainug, that's why there's a whole ishtal shalos. And that Tainug is revealed on Shabbos. Okay, so now we're going to concluding the Ma'im and explaining the whole thing of what's going on over here. So what's Yonasan? So Yonasan said to David, Mochor is Chodesh, v'nifkadet k'yipoket meishavecha. So there's now going to be a new Zman that's emerging now. So first has to be the Helem, Rotza V'shuv. So this comes through Yipoket. Who is Ma'oder the Yipoket? He says that's Yonasan. Yonasan himself is Ma'oder Malchus to be bebittel. Okay, like you said, the teacher, the first stage of the Hashpah has to be Zreik Mora Talmidim, cast the fear over the Talmidim, that they should be in a state of being Mekabel. Aziras Garbo, make yourself small, quoting from the Zoya. Then you can be a Mekabel from Zoya. So this itself is induced by Zoh. That's Vayomer Yonasan. Yonasan is Zoh, Yud Kevav, and David is the final Hey. David is Malchus. Yud Kevav Nosan. But what's he giving? Nesina. So after the Bittel, then comes this tremendous Hashpah, which is higher than Malchus. Zoh gives everything he's got. first putting into place the dynamic of mashpia makabel, and then the mashpia gives everything. Nosan kol hanoisen ben yofa noisen. Teis v'soir. That's the only in Vayishkris Esre'eya Vayifko. They kissed and they wept, they cried. Very beautiful insight that the Shikin kissing is, he said, when the heart cannot contain the Av. You can't put it in Dibur. And Pchiyah, crying, is when the Moyach can't contain the experience. So here's a tremendous hashpah that goes far beyond Malchus itself, the hashpah of Zoh, Vayishku, Vayifku. Riboyer. However, so at this point, Malchus is the pure Makabel and getting this great Gilui from Zoh. In the Nimshal of Dibur, it means that in the word is conveyed very profound feelings or insight, which eventually is unraveled and experienced, contained in the word. But at this point, all the word is a container, and ultimately it will contain it. It will take 40 years for the Makabel to plumb the depth of the Hashpah. But the Hashpah is Beriboy. But the end is David Higdil. The end is the Talmud ascends beyond even the Mashpia. Malchus, the root, ad David Higdil, which means Yonasan stops and falls short of David's expansion, literally. David cried more. David's love and tears were far beyond even Yonasan. Meaning to say that the Hashpah, Yonasan is a catalyst. But at the end, it turns out that David, who is the Makabel, is Chodesh, he's rooted in the Tainuk Shalamayla. And that's why Yonasan acknowledges that and says, you'll be the king and I'll be I'll be your second, your Mishnah Lamelech, I will serve you. When is that Nizgala? That's Nizgala Lasid Lavai. It doesn't say it, but the Kevet Seviv Gever. That's Shabbos. Then it'll be Nizgala Yom Shakoli Shabbos, Haid Rosh Chodesh, Haid Rosh Hashanah, the true Gilui Tainug Lamayla. And this, he says, the words, Yonasan is no shaykhis at all. Ishtalshus is no shaykhis, per se. It will experience it, but via the agency of Malchus. Malchus becomes Altat Mashpia. Because Yonasan is the Chodesh and Mochor Zman. And Malchus is Nis'ala. Malchus means Yidden Pashat. The Shechina, Malchus, Eden, will be Nis'ala and expressive of L'maylim Azman, L'gamri, the true Tainuga Elyon. That's why the beginning, there was Shleimeres Agdoilim, Malchus was Batzilis, the Nebuchadnezzar told him to descend, Bittel. So that's, what is that? That's the last part of the Maimon is very dense, a lot of inyanim here. That Malchus descends into Biyat and Mevared Berurim, that's the bitter Rishon. And the only way to be Mevared is to get down and dirty, as it were, into the world. Now, for the success of that, Malchus needs to be connected constantly to Zoh, to be connected to Olam Elyonim, to a higher state, not to be swallowed up and lost in the Vidas Berurim. Chatichach Atzman As in the Vela. So hang on to your bittel. Hang on to your bittel. No, you're shliach, and you're not part of the world. You represent something higher. Zoh. From where Malchus has descended. That's the Kipoket Meshavecha. But then there's the Bidur Sheni. The Bidur Sheni is, the Kipoket Meshavecha is Zoh, clear. The Kipoket Meshavecha is Zoh, inducing Malchus is his bittul. You, for the success of this mission, first of all, you're going to be sent. You're sent away. Clearer. You're sent away from Atzilis to down into the world. Gone into the world. That's the bittul. To be successful is then the next stage. Is the Hashpah of Zoh in Malchus. Remember, always remain connected to a higher place. You know what? I don't want to rush this. We're going to just tomorrow just revisit, get clear the Bir Rishon, Bir Sheni, go to the culmination, and get 100% clear. So let's just, I don't want to push it here. So tomorrow we'll conclude that, and we'll start the new Maamar, Mitzvah.